We're here for our redistricting hearing, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Marcy Barrera.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you, Marcy.
Board members. Thank you. Marcy Barrera, Assistant County Executive Officer. Welcome. This public hearing today is the second of 4 hearings where Merced County residents can provide input and public testimony on the redistricting process for 2021. Every 10 years, Merced County must redistrict to determine how current boundaries and their voting districts might be redrawn based upon new data from the U.S. Census and input from Merced County residents. All district lines must be reviewed to meet strict requirements and population equity and voting rights protections. To ensure the resources and expertise necessary for preparation of a legally adequate redistricting plan, the county has retained legal counsel, a demographic consultant, and a communications firm to assist with the navigation and the complex legal and demographic issues, as well as extensive outreach requirements. With us today are Chris Scannell from Nielsen Merced and Jeff Tilton from National Demographics Corporation. During today's public hearing, Mr. Tilton will provide a presentation outlining the redistricting process and mapping tools, followed by public testimony on districts and communities of interest, as well as guidance from the Board of Supervisors. So I will turn it over to Jeff Tilton for the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. This will be somewhat of a repeat from the first public hearing presentation with some added bonuses. We'll see if you're staying awake. I have some of those bonuses in there. So we have the redistricting timeline. We had a public hearing on June 8th that I was here along with Chris Scannell. We held a workshop on July 13th in downtown Merced. And then we have been waiting for the census data to be released, and happy to announce the national census data will be released on Thursday, a little bit earlier, like 4 days, but nonetheless, it's early. But, you know, it sure would have been nice to have it in February, March, April, since we're so compacted. And with that, now we can look at 4 to 6 weeks from that time that the state will adjust that data through its prisoner population and have those inmates currently incarcerated, wherever their previous address was, those data pieces will go back into those jurisdictions. And we hope to get that around middle to, I don't like to give dates, but middle to end of September, which is great. It gives us a little more breathing room as we're looking to look at draft maps. Here we are today on the second of 4 public hearings. We will have another workshop on October 19th, same place as we held the first one. And then we will, at that time, prepare draft maps for the board. And that meeting will be on November 19th at 6:30 p.m., the public hearing. We're going to ask folks who submit maps to have those maps submitted by November 2nd. So then we can dress them up in getting ready for the Board of Supervisors. They must be posted 1 week before that Board of Supervisor meeting, so they'll have to be posted by November 9th. It is the intention of that particular meeting on November 16th is that the board will narrow down the drafts to maybe 2 or 3 as we head into the final public hearing on December 7th. That doesn't mean folks have to stop submitting maps. They can still submit map for your consideration. But it also helps with respect to volume when we're going into that December 7th hearing. And there's also, as you can see, deadlines to submit those draft maps as well. We're also looking at how the redistricting process has made an impact on local elections. You can see that we have a map adoption on the 7th. That's our intention. Then we have candidate petition in lieu. The period is January 4th to February 9th. With the filing period, you can see there, February 14th to March 11th. And anybody that's run for office, like the 5 of you have, it's a time of angst. I've been one of those who's run for countywide office before. Obviously, I was not successful. I'm standing here before you. I'd hate to tell you I tried it twice. All right. So we have to follow particular rules as we're looking at draft maps and maps for you to consider. Number one, we must follow federal law. And our intention is for the 5 districts that they are an equal population. I'd love to tell you that's going to happen. It probably won't. There's going to be a variation due just to the dynamics of the districts and the Fair Maps Act that I'm going to talk about in a second. We must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and there can be no racial gerrymandering. Then we move into California's criteria for counties. And it must be in this particular order. So we've just finished the federal laws. Now we're going to look at California. And each draft must, in particular order again, must be geographically contiguous. We can't divide neighborhoods or communities of interest, or at least to the greatest extent possible not to divide those. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those in a second. Same thing with cities and census-designated places. We want to respect those particular boundaries. And then we also want to have easily identifiable boundaries when we're looking at the district lines, and we want them to be compact. We really don't want to see any tentacles reaching into a particular district to grab a segment, etc. It looks kind of ugly, and it's really difficult to defend. And we do know that it's prohibited as to share. We shall not favor or discriminate against a political party. If we can do the column on the left and the column in the middle, then we can consider some of those traditional redistricting principles on the right. But we need to be able to answer yes to federal laws and to the California criteria before we can even begin to look at that column on the right. So what we've been trying to do since we started this process is to get public engagement, and hopefully we're going to get some engagement from the Board of Supervisors with respect to what are the neighborhoods in the county. What are some of the geographic features and boundaries? Are there particular roads, canals, railroads, etc., other kinds of landmarks that really identify a particular neighborhood in the county? Same thing with the communities of interest. Are there some shared neighborhoods or things like homeowners associations? Census-designated places might be a great example of a community of interest, as we've heard from the workshop we had here a few weeks ago. And something to consider as well is, do we want these communities of interest to have representation from one or multiple? If it's a really large community of interest, we might be looking at dividing up that community of interest because it's going to exceed the equal population requirement. We may not have a choice. But we do know that these communities of interest may not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So we had, I think, a great evening on July 13th, as I think most of you were there, or at least part of it, here downtown Merced, and then a segment of folks in Los Banos. And we were able to get some feedback that are listed there. You have it before you as well in your packet. These are things that were pretty powerful statements from those that attended. We also received information from folks who submitted to the redistricting website. So these could be shared. I mean, you're looking at District 1, farming communities. The individual is expressing there is a shared community right there in that particular District 1. You're looking at rural versus urban, that type of thing. There's not really much you can do with Delhi and Hilmar to become part of Stanislaus County, but we're recognizing that's what that person had suggested as a community of interest. So.
Now we know where they might be.
So with this, we also have some mapping tools. I know that we have been able to update some mapping tools since our last public hearing, and I think since our initial workshop. Everything I share with you right now, however, and these mapping tools are available for folks to start drafting maps, etc. now. But with the caveat, anything that they do is with estimated data only. We'll accept whatever they submit. But we'll probably ask them, hey, can you really look at this again? like September 20-something. And so you can make sure that you're equal, at least attempting to make your districts at least equal, and then follow all the other criteria as well. The interactive review map is just that. It's a review map. It's not really a tool, but it allows you, the public, to look at all the maps that have been submitted, regardless if they're legally compliant or not. And there's a column there to the right that'll have all the maps listed there. One can look at them one at a time. They can layer them, etc. We have the simple map drawing tool. People can submit these maps. I don't know if you could tell there on the lower left-hand corner of this image that I've cut off, but it asks for their name and their phone number or email address. It's not to embarrass or anything like that. We would really want to contact individuals to make sure that we are doing the best we can to represent their ideas. This particular map is broken down into population units, and within those population units is the population figure, the number. And so it's really difficult to see, but I think it's a 3-digit number up there in that top right-hand corner. And basically the intention there is to add up all the ones that you've colored and try to get to that ideal equal distribution across the five districts. Obviously there's an inset. It's difficult to see, but almost to the third part of the map there to the right, it says see the Merced area map. So it'll blow up and it'll show just the city of Merced and population units for that. Similar principle. Instead of having the population figures inside each population unit, there is an identifier number. And there's no repeats of these identifier numbers. And you just take that number and you drop it into an Excel spreadsheet based on where you want that particular number, what district you want that particular number to go into, and all the data are tabulated for the author of that map. And it also helps us as well, because it's basically the same thing we would do too. So it does require, obviously, access to Excel, but we have that tool on the redistricting website here. Same principle applies with the name and address. When folks submit their maps for consideration, it is public record, but we will not name the map after the author. It'll come to you as map 101, 102, 103, etc., but it will be public record. We also have District R. It's a great tool. It's really simple. It's an online tool. It's only available in English, but I'm told that Google has a neat little tool that'll translate the language for individuals. It is one where basically you paint. There's 4 tools on this particular District R, and there you can see in the right-hand side of the illustration I provide, there's a finger pointer, which basically moves the map. There's a paintbrush, an eraser, and a zoom in. So it's really that simple. You take the paintbrush, you paint what district you want, and while you're painting, it gives you a total of that district. It tells you how far you are away from the ideal match. And the ideal match, based on the estimated data for the County of Merced, is 54,492. So as you're painting, then you're looking at lines and keeping communities of interest, without dividing them. It's a great little tool. And then they can submit that as a draft map. A little more complex, requires more timing, patience, this is called Maptitude. It's from Caliper. It's available in 6 languages. Does require some patience, and make sure you don't hit the back button accidentally, because all the great work you did will be gone. There's a great help tool. We also have on District R and Maptitude online video demos that could help individuals walk through these particular tools. So we try to make it as user-friendly as possible. However, I must say this one here requires some patience and time, and you will make mistakes, and that's okay. So with that, we're asking folks to really participate in this process by going to the website if possible. I know we do have a robust outreach program. There's a phone number there. There's also the redistricting email address. I did mention that we do have a robust outreach plan. You approved the contract with Trippi Smith. We meet every other week to continue planning on making sure that we are reaching out to typically unrepresented communities in the county, and I think they're doing a great job. With that, I'd take any questions you might have before you open up the public hearing.
You got it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I see that we're doing it as simple as just having paper or something like that. Are these maps, or is this available anywhere to where if somebody came in and they wanted to pick it up? I guess that's more of a question for staff.
That'd be a staff question. You have to pronounce it a little.
Are you asking if they could come and pick up the tools that we handed out at the workshop?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have copies of those. They can get them in Human Resources.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question. Thanks. Because these maps were drafted with estimated data, they'll be updated once the data are released.
Did you push the request?
It's flashing. It's not flashing. There it is.
No, you turned it off.
But now this one's backwards now. Because it's when I turn it off, it's on.
Chair recognizes Silvera.
Thank you. Has anybody submitted maps so far? Are there any maps already submitted?
I have not seen any. Oh, if you staff? No.
And as soon as those are submitted, they'll be posted on the website and for anybody to look at. Is that
what we'll do is we'll notify anybody that submits. Is you submitted a map. Thank you. However, these maps have estimated data on them.
so we won't? The public won't be able to see any of the submitted maps until after we get the final data.
And once we get that final California data and people start submitting maps, we'll start posting them as we process them. We'll start posting them on that review map tool.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it won't be like 1 week before your meeting that you consider these. We'll keep them and be really open about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll now open the public hearing and accept public comment live in person and via voicemail. The voicemail message line has been open to accept public comments since the posting of the agenda. So at this time, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to come forward and make comments?
Hi, my name is Peng Shaw Vang, and
You're
I'm
getting pretty good at working that thing now.
living in Merced County. First, I want to say thank you to the Board of Supervisors. I noticed that the fourth public hearing on December 7th has been moved from 1:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. I want to say thank you. Second thing I wanted to say was thank you to the Board of Supervisors for having a community workshop on October 19th at 6 p.m. The only thing I want to request is that if there could be an expert or demographic consultant there to talk about the data from the 2020 census and the prisoner data so that we can understand the data of Merced County better so that we could draw the maps better. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? If not, we'll go ahead and take the break. We'll return at 2 o'clock, and this will give the opportunity for any voicemails or emails. Okay, we'll go ahead and reconvene. Did we have any voicemails? Okay, then we'll go ahead and play the voicemail.
Hi, my name is Olivia Seidman, Civic Engagement Coordinator with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Echoing the last public comment made, we are grateful to the county for moving the meeting to 6 p.m. And we urge the county in the redistricting process to prioritize communities who have been historically excluded or marginalized from the redistricting process in order to create an equitable map that is accurately reflects the demographics of Merced County. And we encourage outreach to be creative and innovative in including meeting folks where they are through actions such as any door-to-door canvassing or any type of in-community events to collect COIs and feedback on the maps. We urge the county to continue to prioritize language access and language justice by providing materials in Spanish and Hmong, as well as interpreters and translators for public hearings. Thank you.
Okay, and that's it? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I will now turn the mic over to our County Executive Officer, Jim Brown.
Screen back up. That there. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you've seen through the presentation, as Mr. Tilton acknowledged, that at your July 13th workshop there was input from the public regarding communities of interest. At this time of the process, since the data is delayed, we have been utilizing this time to try to gain input related to communities of interest. And so this is a time that the demographer and council and staff are looking for, any input that you may have as a board related to communities of interest. So whether you want to provide feedback or comments on some of the input that's been provided from the workshop or some of the examples that were provided directly to the website. As you kind of think about this, just to refresh your memories on some of the things Mr. Tilton and Mr. Scannell have shared with you in the past, that geographic area of areas in the county that are either urban, suburban, rural, economic similarities where you got industry, and I know we got ag that runs throughout the whole county, but there may be areas that got particular types of industries that you look at, and you be careful, and I know the demographer wants to be careful in looking at those. And then you get at the demographic base when you look at, districts, whether they're school districts, community service districts, and other things that you want to be careful on. And I know the demographer wants to be careful on, and, as they look at those and, trying to keep that continuity there. And so at this point, it's really just seeking, and there's, if you have any specific comments that you want to provide as a board or individually to the demographer, this is that time. Otherwise, we would basically close today out and then, which the next opportunity would be at the workshop, which would be again for the public, after we have the data to be able to give another opportunity to walk through the mapping tools.
Are there any further questions, comments, discussions, and or direction by the board? Oh, sorry, I got Chair recognizes Supervisor Silvera.
Yeah, I don't know who this is a question for Chris or if Jeff is going to, but when we look at those on the slide, when you look at possible neighborhoods, communities, I guess just for my own interest is like when we talk about, I was there at the last workshop and it talked about Santa Ana resources, healthcare, grocery shopping connected to Las Banas. I mean, what do you do with that other than just make sure that that's connected to Las Banas? I guess, like, how do you take that kind of information? I mean, some of these things, hold on, let me look at the one. Okay, UC students in Merced, and then I saw another one on there, higher education levels in Merced because of the UC. So like, what do you do with that? Do you? I would think that we would want to try to keep those groups inclusive. You wouldn't want, but are they, or is it just like what? I don't know. Can you kind of elaborate on some of that? Because I'm really confused with. We talk about communities of interest, and like for example in Santa Ana, there's a community that is a heavily it's a commuter community. They commute over the hill to go to work. So what do you do to help that community to put them in a better position? So what would, I guess, from your point of view, explain to me like kind of how you would look at that?
Yeah, and Jeff can obviously chime in as well. Basically with that sort of feedback, saying we want to be connected to to Los Banos. That's where we do our shopping. That's where we get our healthcare, et cetera. The ideal, and obviously, there's a lot of decisions that can be made, so you can't always necessarily accommodate every request. But essentially what that is people coming in and saying, look, we because we're connected in that way with Los Banos, we'd like to be in the same district with them. Because we share a commonality of representational interests, and so we should have the same supervisor. Not always possible. There may be other factors throughout the map that make that not doable, but that's how we would look at it. And in terms of Santanella specifically, that's something that has a sort of a defined boundary, right? It's a census designated place. It's fairly easy to say, well, that's what this is. It's a geographic area. When you're talking about, for example, UC Merced students, that gets a little bit tougher because those students, aren't necessarily limited to a specific geographic boundary. But you can try to use census data or other information that we have to try and identify where they're most heavily concentrated. And maybe you try and make sure that they're all that concentration is all within the same district. Instead of being divided amongst multiple districts. And so that, it's a little bit of a holistic depending on what the community of interest is. And whether or not you can accommodate the request just depends on how it fits in with all of the other communities of interest and the other criteria that are above it.
Okay. And then, or did you want to add something?
Yeah.
This is what's really great about the mapping tools. There's a great tool here called District R, and I fiddled around with Merced County a number of times, and because there's so much rural area out west, I try to just paint a big thing across, and I think once I hit Los Banos, my equal population balance is skewed. The other point, and so anyway, the individual could perhaps draft a map to support that statement of we do our shopping, medical, all that in Los Banos, even though we live in Santanella. But then on the other side of it, somebody else wrote or chimed in that the kids go to Gustine.
Well, that's what I guess where I was trying to go with it is how do you determine when it's like there's some people that might say, like for the example of concentration of UC Merced students. Some people I would take the mindset of, well, we want them all to be represented as one group, but then the next person is saying, well, no, that kind of concentrates all our voting power. We'd rather have the ability to help elect 2 supervisors instead of 1. So how do you guys take that part into consideration? That's where I guess I was going with it. When you have almost it's the same area, but they got competing interests as whether they want to be with one district or be split into 2 districts.
Right. That becomes a little bit tougher. The sort of default under the new Fair Maps Act is that you keep them together. Okay. Right? That's sort of the presumption. So unless we have people coming in and giving real testimony saying, no, we really don't think that makes sense for us, then I think the effort is going to be made to try and unify them if possible. But in terms of where there's a situation where people may disagree, like the Los Banos versus Gustine, to an extent we rely on you. You know the communities as well as anybody, right? And so ultimately, when there's that dispute, you're the ones who are going to be the best positioned to judge what the real facts are and make that determination. Historically, the courts in that sort of situation are going to be deferential because you are better positioned to know that than anybody else. Most of the time we get testimony on communities of interest, and it's relatively one-sided, relatively clear. We are or we aren't, but there are cases where it's not that clear, and in that circumstance, it's a judgment call.
Okay, and then I guess, and then the other part. No, I just lost it. You're gonna have to give me a second. I was thinking about what you said there. That's all I have for right now, but it'll come back to me.
Okay, Chair recognizes Supervisor Espinoza.
I guess we're at a point where, where the community can really ask for a change in the districts. And one of my questions is, let's say the board adopted a map where 2 supervisors live in one district. What would happen on that situation?
Yeah, so in that circumstance, assuming that the board adopted it, in that circumstance, both supervisors would serve out their current term, that they're elected to. It doesn't matter that they're in or out of the district. And then when the time comes to run for re-election, they got to figure out, where they can run. And so you have 2 in the same district. How it plays out depends on what the election cycles are. If they're on the same cycle, you'd run head-to-head potentially. and then you'd have another election in the unpopulated districts.
Or we'll move back.
Or
to the
yeah, that's
district.
always a possibility. That does happen. And if you're on different cycles, then it kind of depends on who's up and when and all of that. But we can kind of play that out as it comes up. Because
It's probably a question one of the some of the constituents will probably ask, and because I get asked, how come you have a finger going up to Livingston, right? So it's like you got all the south part of the county, and then you come up and grab Livingston. I go, I don't know. It's been there like that since I can remember, 20 plus years ago, or 30 years ago. It's whatever the board votes on in the future. Like I said, by December 15, I guess, right? And anybody can submit as many maps as they can, and if, like I said, but I just I've been told that my district was gerrymandered because they tell me, well, yours is the most neglected, the most in need, and that's just my the comments to me. But like I said, other districts have issues too as well. So nobody's perfect. So I just like I said, if anybody wants to submit a map, and as long as, like I said, it meets the qualifications, I think that all of us, we can pick the map that will probably best be suited for our county and for the future. So, like I said, in my mind, if one was to be adopted with another colleague, like I said, I wouldn't mind. Whatever I get. So it'll be up to us to run or not to run in the future. So, like I said, I think we all love our communities. But my opinion about Atwater and Merced is that too large of a concentration of the population is in those two cities. Nothing against my colleagues. But I think that Merced and Atwater could probably be split up in half or three, so that way each of us have a portion of the city and a portion of rural, which is huge, right? And some of us live from one part of the county to all of the last corner. Like me, I have to drive 40 minutes almost from Livingston to the Grand, and like I said, I love my constituents, and I'm pretty sure everybody loves their constituents, and excuse me, we all try to do our best. So that's just my opinion, and like I said, this is an opportunity for the community to please attend our meetings and give your opinions and submit your maps, and like I said, call us with questions, attend meetings, and call us. I think we all have most of my colleagues are pretty good about calling people back, so just call us with questions, opinions, and so if you don't understand something, thank you again, call us. Thank you.
It looks like Mr. Silvera remembered what he was going to say. Chair recognizes Silvera.
Yeah, so it was basically kind of piggyback on Supervisor Espinoza's comments on how much do you take in consideration the old map that was there. I mean, that finger in Livingston has always been interesting to me, and it was done way before I even thought about could vote or thought about voting or anything like that, but it's always been there. But is that something that you take into consideration that, ultimately just not more than a year ago, I'm going to not pick on you, but using District 1 as the example, the voters voted Supervisor Espinoza back into that same district, and here we are because of the way that the census falls. Is that something that you take into consideration when you're putting all this stuff together to give us something to vote on?
So, the short answer, well, there's kind of a double answer. With respect to District 1 specifically, the history of that district is that it was drawn that way for Voting Rights Act reasons back in the 90s. And so, to the extent that we do the analysis and conclude that still is required, it's going to probably be very similar to that going forward. But, for districts where that's not a consideration, which is really sort of the others, the current districts, I think it's kind of natural to start with the current map because people are familiar with it and that they have those ties. But and historically, you would try to make as little change as you could. That would, most counties would do. But with the Fair Maps Act, depending on the feedback we get, the communities of interest, how they line up, et cetera, it may be that substantial changes are warranted. And so there's more potential for that, I would say, this time than in previous decades.
Perfect, thank you. And then, Jeff, I have played with the R District R map. I've colored it all in. I did, and you start to get out into the rural areas of the west side, and it's like you take up this big old swath of it, and you gain like 2 voters. Like it's not a lot of population up there in the coastal range.
So if I could, and you may have done this because I have, it's hard to see here, but when you have the paintbrush, there's going to be a little square box underneath it. It says something like, don't overdraw what I've already painted, because that'll happen unless you check that box.
I had that happen.
Yeah.
I will say the nice thing about these online tools is, in past decades when we didn't have them, people would come in and they'd rant and rave, this is gerrymandering, you're doing it all wrong. Go show me. And when people actually do it for themselves, they start to understand this isn't as easy as it seems, right? You're making trade-offs every change you make, and you can't always, square the circle. It's not always an easy thing to do. And so it's actually useful for people to have that opportunity to really give it their own go.
Well, just starting with the population basis, right? Like you want to try to roughly keep that equal population. Just starting with that and then actually putting and drawing these little boxes or coloring in these boxes to try to make that work. It's not as simple because the population doesn't care about the, well, here's Highway 140 or here's Highway 33, so I'm going to try to stick there. But it's interesting. I would encourage anybody that is able to go and play with this. I played with it for probably about an hour and a half to get my whole map colored in, and I'm way off. I was having some fun with some of my colleagues, giving them certain parts and taking parts away just to see what it would look like. But no, it's an interesting tool, and you're right, because that's what I encourage anybody and everybody. If you have a better plan, please put it on paper, and send it to us, and give us an option to take a look at it. I'm not saying that I agree with it or disagree with it, but if you're willing to take the time to actually put it down on paper, then at least I know that you're serious about your concern. So thank you guys both.
So when you're doing the map tool, does it take into the Voters' Rights Act at the same time?
Yeah, so okay. So what happens on every single draft map that you receive, and we're encouraging folks to, as you had mentioned, Supervisor Silvera, is that everything that is submitted, and then we'll take it and apply all the data that's associated with whatever draft. You will see a huge data box with every draft map that comes forward, including those that we would deem as likely not being in compliance. The biggest infraction in that respect is the equal distribution is not there across that's usually the 99 point something percent is we can't really consider this map because it's not equal population.
So does the tool recognize that while you're doing it?
Yeah, yeah. And on this one, it'll do total population per paint color. It's only going to give you 5 colors because it's Merced County. On the maptitude, the one next to it, it'll break it down with citizen voting age, population, just a robust set of data for you to look at. And you're going to get that with every single map, and that'll be part of the agenda packet. It'll be part of the on the website, the interactive map reviewer tool, etc.
But if you're drawing a map,
That's right.
If you're drawing a map, it'll also update those numbers in real time. So you can look at it and say, this district is 49% Latino citizen voting age population, or it's 53, or so you'll have, and it'll update those equal population numbers, so you'll know if your district is overpopulated or underpopulated. And it, as you add census blocks, which are the little units of geography, the building blocks, it updates them immediately.
Right, and I think you represented us the last time when we drew that finger, so he's very well.
Yep, that's right.
As our attorney, yeah. Jim,
just to comment real quick, Mr. Scannell and Mr. Tilden. Also, when you're drawing, though, I want to make sure clear for the public and community as they work on these maps, the voters' right piece, though, since that is so technical and so legal, that is not taken into consideration, or is it when they are drafting a map? That's a different component that will have to be looked at separately, correct?
Right.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
It will tell them what the percentages are. The Voting Rights Act analysis goes way beyond that, but it'll give them that baseline at least that they can look at.
Okay. Chair recognizes Supervisor Pedroza.
Thank you. At the workshop that we had earlier, one of the things, because you can't evenly split the population, And so I know that there is some variance there, right? So I don't want, I guess if you can explain that, because I don't want people to, go and do these and then say, oh, well, I can't get to this number. What's my wiggle room, if you will?
So the rule that the Supreme Court has laid down over the years is a 10% deviation. And the way you figure that out is you figure out what the ideal population is. You figure out the one that's the furthest away underpopulated, the ones that's the furthest away overpopulated, and you figure out what percentage over and under it is. So -4 plus 5 is 9%. And if you're within 10%, the Supreme Court has said we're going to presume that that's legitimate. If you go over that 10%, then you have a really heavy burden of proving why that's justified. We're not going to do that here because in a jurisdiction the size of Merced County, there's no reason to. Unless you have a little tiny jurisdiction where maybe you could get away with it. But there's enough population, there are enough census blocks here that there's no reason for us to get over that threshold.
Chair recognizes Supervisor Silvera.
So on that, when you talk about that 10% deviation, is it strictly a 5 over 5 under, or is it a 4-6? Is that the range?
In a lot of jurisdictions adopt 5 plus or minus 5 just as an easy benchmark, but it's not. And the Supreme Court's never said it has to be that, right? The 4-6 in theory is fine.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This concludes the Board of Supervisors meeting for August 10th, 2021. The next scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting will be held August 24th, 2021, and the next redistricting public hearing is scheduled for November 16th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. This concludes the Board of Supervisors meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you.